A game console arrived in 1993 with CD-quality sound, full-motion video, 32-bit graphics, and support from one of the most famous executives in the industry. It looked like the future. It was also priced at $699.95. That was more than many televisions, nearly 4 times the price of a Super Nintendo, and roughly $1,400 in today's money. The machine was called the 3DO, and its failure is usually blamed on that absurd price. But the price was not a mistake someone could simply fix. If you want to uncover the business decisions behind gaming's biggest failures, subscribe to Cartridge Graveyard. It was the visible symptom of a business model that gave the 3DO almost no chance from the beginning. Worse, one decision meant to rescue its future would remove its last defense against the rival that buried it, and that decision would cost $100 million. The idea came from Trip Hawkins, the founder of Electronic Arts. Hawkins saw a structural problem in the console industry. Nintendo and Sega controlled their hardware, approved every game, manufactured the cartridges, and collected substantial licensing fees. Publishers had to operate inside someone else's kingdom. Hawkins imagined something closer to VHS. Instead of one company building a proprietary console, 3DO would create a universal technical standard. Electronics companies could license that standard and manufacture compatible machines. Game publishers would pay a much smaller royalty, reportedly around $3 per disc, so developers would have more freedom and keep more of their revenue. It sounded elegant because it promised to align everyone's interests. Panasonic, Gold Star, and Sanyo could sell hardware. Publishers could release cheaper CD-ROM games. Players could buy one platform supported by an entire electronics industry. But there was a hidden contradiction. Traditional console makers often sold hardware at very low margins, or even at a loss, because they earned money from every game sold afterward. Panasonic could not do that. It received no meaningful stream of software royalties, so every 3DO unit had to be profitable by itself. The 3DO company wanted the machine everywhere, but its manufacturing partners needed a premium price. So the business model designed to create an open mass-market standard produced an expensive luxury appliance instead. On October 4, 1993, Panasonic released the Real FZ1 in the United States. It looked more like high-end audio equipment than a toy. A motorized disc tray slid out from a heavy black chassis. Inside were a 32-bit ARM processor, dedicated graphics hardware, CD storage, and enough multimedia power to make the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis seem suddenly old. But shoppers did not compare processor architecture. They compared price tags. A Super Nintendo or Genesis could often be found for well under $200. The new 3DO cost $700 before adding a second controller or another game. Even Sega's CD add-on, itself criticized as expensive, launched at less than half that amount. For the price of one 3DO, a family could buy both leading consoles, several games, and still have money left. That might have been survivable if the launch had felt irresistible. Instead, early buyers encountered a painful contradiction. The console of the future barely had anything to play. The Panasonic system launched with just one game, Crash and Burn, a futuristic racing title bundled with the hardware. More software followed, but much of it leaned heavily on the novelty of CD-ROM. Grainy video clips, live actors, and enormous amounts of recorded dialogue looked sophisticated in magazine screenshots. In motion, many games felt shallow. The extra storage had been treated as the experience rather than a tool for building one. That distinction mattered. Nintendo sold worlds people wanted to inhabit. Sega sold speed, attitude, and Sonic the Hedgehog. The 3DO initially sold technology. Technology is impressive for a demonstration, but players do not form childhood memories around compression formats. There was another problem. Because 3DO encouraged publishers with low royalties and relatively open access, the platform attracted a flood of software. But openness without strong quality control created inconsistency. For every ambitious release, consumers saw awkward interactive movies, rushed ports, and adult-oriented titles that made the machine's library look less like a curated next generation and more like the strange backshelf of a video store. Still, the hardware itself was not hopeless. In 1994, games began appearing that showed what the system could really do. Electronic Arts released Road Rash with textured roads, licensed music, and gloriously chaotic motorcycle combat. The Need for Speed delivered detailed cars and a sense of speed that felt far ahead of 16-bit racing games. Later, Gex gave the platform a recognizable mascot, while titles such as Return Fire, Star Control 2, and The Horde built genuine cult followings. For a brief moment, the 3DO seemed capable of recovering. Panasonic cut the price, awareness increased, and magazines could finally point to experiences that justified the hardware. But this improvement created its own trap. The console was becoming attractive just as far more dangerous competition approached. By 1994, Sony was preparing the original PlayStation. Unlike Panasonic, Sony controlled the platform directly. That meant it could price the console aggressively because it expected to earn money from software licensing. Sony also courted developers, emphasized fast 3D graphics, and built a brand aimed not merely at children or technology enthusiasts, but at the growing generation of teenagers and young adults who saw games as part of popular culture. The 3DO had tried to become the VHS standard of gaming, but a game console was not a VCR. VHS players all performed essentially the same task: they played tapes. Consoles depended on exclusive software, consistent marketing, developer tools, controller design, price, and a clear identity. A standard shared across multiple manufacturers sounded consumer-friendly, but it weakened the central authority needed to coordinate all those pieces. Even the controller exposed the compromise. The original 3DO machines included only one controller port. Extra controllers had to be connected through a port on another controller, forming a chain across the room. It technically worked, but it felt like a workaround on a $700 product. Small details like that quietly damaged the fantasy of perfection. Gold Star released its own 3DO model, while Sanyo produced one for Japan. More manufacturers were supposed to create competition and lower prices. But multiple versions also made the platform harder to explain. Was 3DO a Panasonic console, a Gold Star console, a software format, or a company? Nintendo could place Mario beside a gray box. Sega could place Sonic beside a black one. The 3DO brand had no equally simple image. By 1995, price cuts brought some models down to roughly $300. Under different circumstances, that could have changed everything. But Sega's Saturn entered the American market at $399, while Sony announced the PlayStation at just $299. Sony needed only one number to destroy the remaining argument for 3DO: $299. Now the supposedly premium future machine was competing against a newer, faster, heavily supported console at essentially the same price. Retailers had limited shelf space. Developers had limited budgets. Players had limited money. So momentum moved towards Sony, and once it moved, the 3DO's open platform could not pull it back. The system sold roughly 2 million units worldwide. That was not nothing, but it was nowhere near enough to establish a universal standard. The 3DO company therefore placed its hopes in a successor called M2, a dramatically more powerful design intended to compete in advanced 3D graphics. M2 was not just another prototype. It was supposed to fix the original machine's deepest weakness. With stronger 3D hardware and a major electronics company behind it, 3DO could abandon the $700 confusion of the first launch and confront the PlayStation with a coordinated second attempt. But 3DO needed money, manufacturing power, and a company willing to carry that risk. So it made the decision promised at the beginning. In 1995, Matsushita, the parent company of Panasonic, purchased the M2 technology from 3DO for a reported $100 million. The sale was meant to save 3DO's future. It gave the company badly needed cash, while Matsushita appeared to offer the factories, retail relationships, and marketing strength required to turn M2 into a real console. But the sale also transferred control of 3DO's last serious weapon to a company that could simply choose not to use it. And that is exactly what happened. Matsushita ultimately abandoned plans to release M2 as a home console. The successor vanished, while the original 3DO faded from stores. Selling M2 did not create Sony, or invent the PlayStation. It helped Sony in a more direct way. It removed a potentially powerful competitor at the precise moment the new market was taking shape. A decision made to rescue 3DO surrendered its final chance to challenge the rival already replacing it. Meanwhile, Electronic Arts, the company Hawkins had founded, became one of the most important third-party publishers on Sony's PlayStation. The low-royalty, developer-friendly future Hawkins wanted did arrive in a different form, but it arrived on a platform with centralized control, aggressive pricing, and a clear identity. That was the final irony. 3DO had been created to free publishers from the kingdoms of Nintendo and Sega, but its decentralized model could not coordinate price, identity, and long-term strategy. Sony borrowed the most attractive part of Hawkins' vision, strong support for outside developers, but combined it with the centralized control that 3DO had rejected, so the $699 price did not kill an otherwise healthy console. The price revealed the impossible bargain at its core. Hardware companies needed profit on every machine, publishers needed a large audience, and players needed an affordable reason to join. Each group was waiting for the others to move first. The 3DO was powerful, ambitious, and in several ways ahead of its time, but it proved that being early to the future is useless if almost nobody can afford the ticket, and that selling tomorrow to survive today can mean never reaching it at all. Would the 3DO have survived at $299, or was its business model doomed at any price? Share your view below, and if you enjoy stories about brilliant technology that lost the battle, stay with the channel for the next one.